Say the truth hurts, so you about to feel pain, and I gotta do work. God said I gotta do work, cause it's off with the name, Savage Truth. Savage Truth, it's the Savage Truth, the Savage Truth.
Welcome to the Savage Truth. I am Pastor Roy Dockery, and this is another session of Ask Pastor Roy. So I'm gonna jump right into it. Like I said, I've been giving a lot of updates, but like read the description box below. Y'all be skipping over it so you don't get some pertinent information. So Patreon is gone. Discord is where it's at. So come in there, get it popping, because I'm not on any other social media unless you want to hit me up on LinkedIn. We can discuss professional things, Jesus, whatever it is. But that's the only other social media platform you're going to catch me on. And I don't interact much in the contents on YouTube because contrary to popular belief, just because I make content on YouTube, I don't actually use YouTube except to post content or to look up a video on how to repair an RC car or whatever else. I don't follow anybody on YouTube. I don't really watch YouTube videos. So don't spend a lot of time on the platform other than publishing content and then responding and trying to check in on comments in YouTube Studio app. So best place to communicate, chat, drop a question, ask a question is in the Discord. It is free. We will have membership tiers in there, but there will always be free access to commune. Come in, share your praises, share your concerns, and get loved on in the Savage Truth Network. So with that said, from the Discord, we have a question, and in the Discord, we have a channel that says Ask Pastor Roy. Sometimes I answer those questions when I'm typing, especially if I'm traveling or on the road. I've got some time right now on this evening, so I'm going to answer a few of these. I'll actually post these answers early in the Discord community, and then they'll be released on our normal Savage Truth release schedule on Tuesdays as we go forward. But the Discord will get to see the answers as the videos are made. So the question is there a way to tell a difference between this is a season and something needs to change, right? Example, in marriage and parenting, we go through seasons. Like a new infant brings its own challenges that fade once a baby finds its routine. Maybe you're not always going to be content at your job and it's just a season, but sometimes something has to happen for things to change, right? So the question is, how do you tell the difference between this is a season and something needs to change? And again, and the person who says this always knows what I do, right? Seasons also require work, right? So coming into or out of a season, right? You come into spring, like you're normally ending whatever you were doing for winterization, right? And, the Bible has a lot of references to seasons because of farming and harvesting and a lot of the things from a natural perspective, right? But work still has to be done even when seasons naturally transition, right? And so I think in like modern times, because we don't do a lot of farming, right? And our aspect or our view of seasons is really based on weather changing. When this isn't just weather changing, like you had to change your home, you had to winterize your house when it was going to get cold, right? Like you had to prepare the ground when there was going to be frost so that it didn't kill off like all the stuff that you have in the previous season. So like there was a lot of work involved in the changing of seasons where you were preparing for something new. Where now, because we live in houses with central air and heat, like we're really like preparing our wardrobe. Like we might put different clothes if, depending on the size of our closet, we might have to rotate in our fall stuff, rotate in our winter stuff, and then switch to our summer gear. But like from our job perspective, a lot of us just kind of do the same thing all year, right? So that's one of the reasons I think we get confused in this example, and we tend to overlook the fact that like even when we're going through seasons, right, there is always a requirement for work. And there's always a requirement as a Christian that we should be growing and that we should be progressing and we should be changing. So the reason some people get stuck in a season is because they're not changing, right? Like because you're not working. So you get stuck in a rut and the season actually isn't staying the same. You are staying the same. Other things are changing. You're not just changing and pay attention and working so that you can move when other things are moving, right? So that's the one thing that I'll challenge kind of primarily in that thought is one, all seasons require work, preparation, and transition, right? So even if you are in a season, you don't just sit in that season until it ends. You should be preparing for that season to end, right? Like, so like, so if you're in a, right, and that's because these things move cyclically. Like whenever I go through a period of, like I just did, right? I went through a period of like professional and financial success. And like that was a season. But when I'm going through that, then I'm starting to like stack money and I'm waiting for the next season, because like the next season is going to be different. So there could be a dry season approaching after this, right? And then we had all of these issues with my wife's car, and now I'm dealing with lawyers and attorneys and all this other stuff. And like this is just on the heels of getting a new job and getting promoted and having more money, right? Like, but now I've got all of these issues. But like I was prepared because I'm like, yeah, I'm coming out of a season, right? It's like all of these things have been going well. Like we've got all of these dynamics, but like that has to come to an end. And not to say that like being blessed is something that's naturally going to decline. Like my job didn't change, like my income didn't change, but there's going to be a challenge that presents itself, right? Because that's how we grow, right? Like we grow from the adversity, we grow as we progress through different challenges, different stages, and manage to overcome or navigate through different obstacles. So we should always be expecting turbulence in the midst of life. We should always be preparing for transition, and we should always be looking for signs that things are changing, right? And so when things change, right? And we should always be looking for those signs. So to kind of keep it in a season analogy. So we should always be looking for the signs that things are changing. Now, the whole aspect of we need to do something to make things happen, or we need to do something to make changes happen, that should be an ongoing, constant process, right? Like that is sanctification, right? Like that is progressive sanctification. That like I'm finding things, I'm looking for things, I'm uncovering things in my own heart, in my own mind, in my own behavior, in my own habits that I need to change, right? And a lot of this is for the purpose of us not getting stuck in a season, right? If we're stuck in a season because there's a challenge that we're not addressing or overcoming, like if we're constantly looking and evaluating the speck in our own eye, if we're always evaluating the state of our own heart, if we're always, right, if we're always testing and testing to show ourselves approved, then there should always be a point where we realize like something needs to change. Something needs to change in my behavior. Something needs to change in my perspective. Something needs to change in the way that I view this situation, right? Because like you're at a job and you don't like the job and there's a problem, but maybe what needs to change is the way that you look at your job and the way that you see your responsibility. And I have these conversations with my mentees and they're having problems with their bosses. I'm like, have you ever thought that you were there because God needs you to minister to your boss or show your boss what patience and grace looks like? Right? So if you change, right? Like, and this happened to one of my mentees, like he changed that perspective. He started being the advocate that supported the boss that he had conflict with, right? And his season lasted a little longer than he expected. But at the end of the season, the harvest of what happened with his business and the way that God positioned him and gave him favor with folks because of the fact that he chose to stay, right? But it was like the situation didn't change. The boss didn't change. The job didn't change. He changed, right? He changed the way that he was interacting with that situation and let God position him in a way that like, I'm going to be here to serve God. And then when God is done using me in this situation, right, then I can move on. Then that season is over. So, right, the other thing about seasons and making changes is, one, you always have to evaluate yourself to see how you are contributing to the problem or how you're contributing to the obstacle, and then how you can, what you can do, right, as a Christian, as a person, as a husband, as a parent, to make it better, right? Like, if you're causing the problems that are making this season more difficult, and you just want to get out of the season, like you're trying to escape responsibility. Like Like, no, don't leave the season. Don't leave the relationship. Don't just drop your kids off at your parents' house. Like, work through that situation. Figure out what it is in you that's exacerbating or causing more issues in this season, and then deal with it, right? It's difficult. It'll take time. But deal with it. Put it on your prayer list. Talk to your therapist about it, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, talk to your significant other about it. But know that in every season, there's something that you can do in your mentality, right? That gives you better clarity and gives you the ability to endure longer. Because what you don't want to do is quit the season too early, right? Because we know that, like, especially go again back to the farming analogy, the harvest comes at the end of the season, right? Like if you jump out in the middle, like there's no manifestation of what's been planted or what's been growing or what's been watered, because you're not waiting until the end. So like a lot of us haven't gained, right, some of the addition that God's trying to give us, because we kept exiting before it came to fruition, because there was something in us or something in a situation that we weren't willing to overcome, right? There was a challenge that we weren't willing to face. There was a level of patience we weren't willing to show. There was a level of self-control that we didn't want to exercise, right? Because we don't want to work in the fruits of the Spirit. We want we want things to be the way that we want them when we want them. And that's not how that works. So that would be the thing that I say on that specifically, right? Like, one, seasons always require change, transition, and preparation. And then sometimes the change that needs to happen is we always need to figure out what change needs to happen within us. Like, what change needs to happen in me to make this situation better? What change needs to happen in me to change the way that I feel about this situation or this circumstance? Because if I can change my heart, right, to where now I'm not emotionally or unreasonably driven to try to exit a situation, I can more clearly see when God creates an opportunity, God opens the door for me to leave. Right. And so my Aunt Dion said something to me once that I thought was really important, because we were having some issues at the church. And I'm like, look, I don't have to deal with this. Like, I don't need this. Like, I love God. God loves me. I can just go home and I can minister to my family and not have to deal with these microaggressions and blatant racism that we were facing at the church at the time. And then she asked me a question that I've reiterated to multiple people because it was such a great thing to say. She said, do you want to leave, or has God released you? And I knew in that moment, right, without hesitation, I want to leave, right? Because like this wasn't like a prayerful thought out, right? It was like in that moment I was upset. Like, I kept asking God, like, why do you want me to still be here? And I'm waiting on that answer. And I was frustrated it hadn't come. And then the situation is getting worse. And then, then Trayvon Martin died. And it was just like, oh my God, like, why am I still here? Like, I need to leave. And she asked me that question. Do you want to leave, or did God release you? Right. And then we wound up staying there for like a year or more. Right. And there were wonderful things that happened. There were transformational things that happened. Right. But then God wound up moving in my career, getting me promoted in a way and in a timeline that was absolutely ridiculous. Right. Becoming a vice president within 5 years. And then I was absolutely, and then I definitely had a release because God moved me to the other side of the country. Right. We left Delaware and moved to Colorado. So it's like, that was complete peace. Everything went well, right? The house got rented out, like everything went absolutely smoothly. But it's like, if I would have exited at an earlier point, there's a lot of things that I wouldn't learn that later got applied. And from a ministry perspective, when I'm dealing with anti-racism, when I'm dealing with evangelical Christians, when I'm dealing in the conservative Christian space, that I would not have learned in that space had I exited too soon, right? So that's the thing. Like, be mindful. What can we change? And just because you feel like leaving, make sure before you make a jump or you make a change that God has released you to do so. Because if you leave somewhere and you don't have peace, that's because God didn't release you. So that's my answer to that question. Another Ask Pastor Roy from the Discord. Join the Discord. It's in the description below. So that's all I've got in that message there. I'm trying to knock out a couple of these videos because I got to get back on the grind. May is going to be a busy month. We got a lot of stuff to do. God is showing out, and y'all get some of those updates later. But yeah, your boy is going. I'm getting on some things here. We're getting on some things, and the new job is like the least of those things, and the new job is phenomenal, by the way. But yeah, so that's all I've got. Again, I'm Pastor Roy. I'm gonna try to keep remembering to say that. Please don't judge Christ by Christians. Judge Christ by Christ. Read his words. Let him testify to his own greatness. Those red letters are a great example of what he thought in his philosophy. So God bless you. Love you. Peace out.
They keep asking who I am, I just tell them I'm a Christian. Occupation, a description, I just tell them I'm a Christian. Nationality, ethnicity, I tell them I'm a Christian. Keep the hyphens in division.